Hey guys, this is Mihai from Pixelmakers, and in this video we'll talk about how to properly write, maintain and deploy code for complex Webflow projects. So, first of all, I'll talk about my ideal setup and how I reached this setup after years of experience with tools like Webflow, Shopify, and frameworks like Astro and Next.js. So, code structure. So when it comes to doing a setup, I have a few goals. So it must be easy to collaborate with other devs, designers, marketers. I must have, or it's a personal preference, but I really like to use TypeScript. I want to use hard module replacement, which means that when I do a change in my code, I want it to be reflected on the browser instantly. I also want to have version history. Basically, I want to see a track record of changes I've made to that code. And I want to have CI/CD. Basically, when I do a change and I push it to GitHub, I want it to be to reach the project without me doing anything else. Okay, so first, let me give you a bit of context of what it means to do a non-enterprise Webflow project. We won't talk about enterprise because in an enterprise you have branching, so it's easier to collaborate on that type of project. And on traditional headless CMS project, assuming something like Next.js plus Sanity. So these are two completely different projects, and you have pros and cons on each. But let's look at the Webflow, the non-enterprise Webflow project. So on non-enterprise, if you look at the Webflow, you have staging and production, which means that you have like two timelines, let's say. And actually, let's do it the other way around, staging and production. All right. But the problem with Webflow is that it's really just one, because it's not like you can do a page and publish it at a later date. Meaning that if you do a page and your marketer does a page and your marketer deploys, but you are not done yet, it's too bad. It's going to get deployed. So imagine we have a developer, John. He's working on some new calculator logic. So he's doing the UI first. He creates the UI, he pushes into staging, and then Sally comes along and she really needs to get a new landing page live. So she comes here, and she pushes into the website here. Now, what happens here is that you now have a broken feature on your website because this calculator is not yet finished. So if somebody tries to use it, it's gonna be broken. Okay, so until you release it, until you deploy the calculator logic, you sort of risk having a broken feature on your website. Okay. So yeah, it's a lot of friction. Sally or your client or somebody else would come to you and say, hey, this got published and it shouldn't have been published. So you go to the Webflow project and you hide it, you push it again, you look at staging and so on. It can create a lot of friction. For small projects, it's not an issue because it's not that many features that need to be done. But on larger projects, this can really be frustrating. So yeah, she pushes there actually. So she pushes here, and this ends up being live, as I said. And then when you do your thing and publish, it will get published here. Okay, all right. Now let's take a look at how this plays out in a traditional project. So in a traditional development project, you still have something called staging, but it's actually develop, and production would be main. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll leave it as is. And in addition to this, you actually have a dev staging and the marketing staging. Which means that if Sally here creates this landing page and she pushes it here, that would end up being in production. But if John creates his calculator, and he would usually have yet another branch called fit calculator. He creates the calculator logic. Let's say sometime here. And this would first get published into development. And then from development, after it's been approved or tested or verified, it ends up being in production. And just for clearance, I'll put this in red. I'll put the production in red. So this makes it much more isolated, and you are not so afraid that you're going to break the website. And you can really, it empowers more collaboration, because then if you have another developer called Max and he's working on authentication, let's say, and he builds the authentication UI and then the authentication logic, and maybe he's done in between your part here, then he's going to push directly into staging. You know, he's pushing in between, and then that change and may end up live before your calculator without breaking your calculator. So it's really a much cleaner experience. So ideally what I want, even in a Webflow project, is to get as close to this structure as possible. So the way I achieve this is that in here, I break this up a bit and I do another staging for development. So I do this staging for development, and then as developers we push into this dev staging, and then we push into staging, and then we push into production. And yeah, we still have this broken feature, let's say, sometimes, but it's much reduced. It's a lot cleaner approach overall, and you get a lot better control over your code. So this is one aspect. This is the collaboration aspect. Now, for the other two, we achieve this at Pixelmakers by using Vite. So Vite is a bundler, and you can write TypeScript, and it can get compiled down to JavaScript. And it also has HUD module replacement. So if I do a change, if I'm using Vite even in Webflow, and I do a change, it will get reflected on the website. And the last two I achieved through a combination of GitHub plus Cloudflare. So this is one aspect. One other aspect I forgot to include here is sharing logic between, and I'll put this in quotes, apps. So if I need to write, imagine you need to do a feature on a client's website where they request an API integration, maybe for currency exchange. So in that case, you need to use an API. So you need some sort of server to communicate with that API, and you need some client-side logic to call that API. And in this case, you have two applications. You have the client-side application and you have the server-side application. And to be able to share code more easily and not have to use something like an npm private package, you can just do a monorepo setup, which is a fancy term for saying that you have everything in one project. So you have a monorepo and you have two applications, one for API, which would be the server, one for the client side logic, which would be the, let's say, web or client. And then maybe you have some sort of database, or you need to share something in between. So if you use TypeScript, maybe you want to share some types, which is definitions between these two projects, so you can have something like this. Okay, so to achieve this kind of setup, instead of just creating one project, I use Monorepo. So it's a solution from Vercel that lets you create monorepos setups very, very easily. And I use it with PNPM, actually PNPM workspaces. This is a package manager. It's similar to NPM, and NPM also has this feature, but in my case, we found that it's a lot better to use it PNPM. It has a lot less issues that we know with NPM. Okay, enough talking. Let me show you how this is done in practice. So we'll first go to Turborepo. If you go to installation, you can copy this command and you can paste it here to basically create your Turborepo setup. You can pick between different packages. You can use Yarn if you prefer that. I just use PNPM. Okay, now it's going to download all of the project files from the server and configure a project. And it also gives you an example project. So if you just run pnpm run dev, you'll see that it created two projects, one for docs, one for web. And if you open one of them, you'll see that it's a Next.js application. But we are doing a Webflow code. We don't need any Next.js. So I'm going to delete all of this. And we also don't need this UI project, UI package actually. And I don't need this React library. I don't need this Next.json. And also for ESLint, I'll delete the Next.js, the React internal file, and in package, it was exporting these two files, so I'm just going to delete them. All right, and now if I run pnpm install, it deleted all of those unnecessary packages. So just clear this up, and in apps, I will add, if I press get started here, I can add a new project with Vite. So I can just do pnpm create Vite, and we want it to be in this apps folder, apps, and I'll do it in a web folder. You can select a framework. In our case, we will use just TypeScript. So I'll just do that. And now if we navigate to that folder and we run pnpm run dev, actually we need to install the dependencies first, and then we can do pnpm run dev. And now if we open this, we see that we have a default TypeScript project. Perfect. but I'm going to remove some of the files. CSS is going to be maintained by Webflow, so we don't need that. Same with any icons. Main, I'm just going to put hello world here, and for counter, we don't need it, we'll delete it. All right. Now, to make sure that it works with Webflow, I'll also include Vite config, which is some special configuration. So this Vite config just sets up the server, and I specify from where it should build the files, and that we have jQuery as a dependency, because in Webflow you already have jQuery installed. All right, so with this being said, let's say we also need an API or a server for some reason. So I will go to Hono. You have here Cloudflare workers. You can copy this command. Make sure that you are, I'll do cd 2 times, and make sure that you are in the root. And now I'll do another application called API. And we use Cloudflare workers. We want to install dependencies with pnpm. Perfect. So now that we have these two, if I'm inside the root and I run pnpm run dev, I can see that I have 2 projects running, one for the client-side logic and one for the API. Perfect. So now let me show you what we can do next. So let's say that in web, main.ts. Okay, so usually what we do is that we need to make sure that we run logic after Webflow, the Webflow variable gets initialized. Because if you visit, let me publish this. If you visit any Webflow website and you inspect and you go to console, you'll see that Webflow injects some stuff into the website. So you can see here we have version, for example. They have some stuff for animations, interactions, and that sort of stuff. So we want to add our logic after that logic got pushed. So we do something like this, where we define, we push into the window.webflow object. So we can do a function. I like to do a function actually to separate that a bit, and we push it into here. Now you see that TypeScript by default throws an error on this because it doesn't recognize Webflow as being a default object inside a window. So, but by the way, window is just the browser itself. Okay, so it contains a ton of stuff that you can use. All right, so we'll define a file, global.d.ts, and in this file we will extend, or we'll define the window again. So we'll write interface window, and we do Webflow any. Now we no longer have an error, and it recognizes that we have something like this. Perfect. Okay, so now if I go into Webflow, let's say we want to do some logic for some reason. And let's say we want to do I'll go into this API. Let's say we want this one to return a random number. Okay, that was quick. That's why I love using cursor, because it autocompletes very fast. Yeah, we want to use a random number, and we want to output on the screen. So the approach I like to follow is that we can create a custom element. We can name it here actually, px, let's say hello, or rand numbers, okay. And no, rand number, let's say, okay. And inside, let's say we put dash. And now, let's say I want to wrap this with div, just to give it some padding. Top, bottom, left and right. And we have these random numbers. Now, okay, let's do it with one random number. I'll publish. And if you see here, I've used a custom HTML element. And if you look at the documentation, custom elements, JavaScript, in JavaScript, you can use these custom elements. You can basically do a class and you can extend another default HTML element and use its properties and yeah, do whatever you want. So the advantage to using this is that I can do something like, I'll do a component called randNumber.ts. I'll do a class px randNumber. We extend the HTML element, and we need to first. So this part will bring us what the HTML element has, and then we extend it. And connected callback is a method that you can use to run some logic as soon as this got initialized. So in our case, we set the inner HTML of the element to hello world. And then here in main.ts, we can check if you have that. So we can check if the document contains any of those random numbers and it has at least one. We import the JavaScript code for this. And with this, you can ensure that your code is much more efficient because you only inject some code if you really need that code. All right, so going back, if I refresh the page, I see that we see the dash for a bit, and then we see the hello world. And what's nice about this approach is that if I copy this a few times, and let's say I put a grid and do 3 by 3 and publish. Okay, and I refresh. I don't need to do anything else. So the logic will run, the logic that you define for inside this file, inside this class, will run every time you have that kind of element. So you don't need to do things like const rand the number elements and you select all of them and then you do for and you loop through them and inject logic. No, everything is contained, so you just need to reuse it. And let's do it a bit more complicated. Let's say that this API, actually we've already done this endpoint that returns a random number. So now if I go into web, another interesting and very useful part about Vite is that we can use environment variables. So I can do Vite underscore API URL and paste this path that we have for the server. We do localhost. And then in this, actually this is the API, and we can go inside this component, and in here we'll do async get random number. We'll use that endpoint. We can dynamically pass that import to this, and we get the data and we return the data. And here in this we can do, okay, we first get the random number and we then write it to to each element. So now if I refresh, I see that it's not valid. Let's see why. Okay, it's because we return a text. So now if I refresh, what? Okay, let's try to republish this. Wow, we get, okay, this is new. We get a 404. Okay. I think I know why we get a 404. Now, if I comment this out. Interesting, okay. Yeah, let's see what this data brought over. Vite API URL. I'm curious if you do a console log. Okay. So what happens? Funny. So what happens is that because we have undefined, it tries to fetch the not found page. Because yeah, it. But it's fine. We have the env Vite API URL with an uppercase L. Okay, and now we hit a different issue, which is the CORS policy. Basically, when you're using a server, you need to specify from what origins, basically from which URLs you can call that API. So you can, with Hono, it's very easy to set up CORS. So we can do, yeah, it has a function called CORS, and you can specify the origins here. So if you have multiple websites, you can put the links here for those websites, and you put what headers you allow and what methods. If you accept post, get, options, patch, delete, and so on, max age, expose headers. And now if we refresh, we see that we get some random numbers. And if we refresh for each of these, we get some random numbers. I mean, now, yeah, it's true that we did it for test purposes, but it will fetch. I mean, if we look at the server, every time we do a refresh, it's going to call this API. All right. Let me remove that and also this to clean up the console log. And yeah, we have this done. If you need to use environment variables in Hono, so imagine you are doing some logic with Stripe, okay? So you need to store that key securely somewhere. So you store it in the API, and you can use .dev.vars because we were in Cloudflare, and you can store that secret key here. And you would put the secret, and then in index to use that secret, first you do a type bindings, and then you pass it to this Hono, and then in here you do const secret key, and then you can do console log by that secret key. Okay, so if we reload this and refresh, we see that we don't have a secret key. Was it called a secret key? Let me check. Yeah, secret key. Let's cut this server and start it again. Yeah, secret key is secret. Now, I just realized that I haven't showed you what's the magic behind this and how this runs. So if I go into site settings in here and we go to custom code, we see a very important piece of code that I took from a repository called, if you do a Google search for Webflow Vite, you'll find this repository, and it contains this script here. So what this script does is that basically, if you are running the server locally, it will use your local code. Otherwise, it will use the production code, which means that even on a published website, you don't need to go into Webflow to be able to write code. All right, so this is what we use to run this script here on the front end, in case you're wondering. And this error here comes because for some reason we need to use DOM here as well, because console is part of the DOM, and we can use that in Cloudflare. All right, perfect. So now that we have this, let's try to also deploy it and get it live. So first, we need to create a GitHub repository. So if I go into GitHub, let me open this window. If I go into GitHub, I press new here, we can do a repository, YouTube video code, Webflow structure. I'll make it public so you can have this as a reference. I'll create a repository, and I'll initialize this. I just realized that I tried this before, so I already initialized. So I can do git remove origin. So I just remove my origin, and I can initialize it again. So I'm just running these commands. For git add, because we already have some code, I'll put a dot and it will add everything. Then we can write a commit message. We create a branch called main. We add the remote, which is basically the link to this repository, and we hit push. All right, I'm clearing this up. We have some code. So now I'll go to Cloudflare. You need to go here in workers and pages, click create. And first let's deploy the API. So I'm going to import a repository. I'll select my personal GitHub account, video Webflow structure, or you can select your own repository. And in here, you need to give it a name. So I'm going to give it video YouTube structure API. You should also copy this name and paste it here in Wrangler. Then in here, root directory is going to be apps API, because this is the path. So we are in apps and in API. And for build variables, you put whatever you have in your dev.vars. Now, these are secrets, okay? So these do not get pushed into GitHub. So if I check my repository and go to apps and go to API, I'll see that I don't have that dev.vars file, because see, there are secrets. But if I go into Wrangler JSON, if you have something like not so secret variable that you need to put here, you can use these vars. And this will automatically get picked up by Cloudflare, so you don't need to specify them here. But yeah, let's say that we want to use this secret. I'll encrypt it, and that's it. Okay, that got deleted when I pasted, so I'll grab this again. I'll paste it here. And yeah, it also tells us that we need to do that. And we save and deploy. All right, and this is initializing. So it has a few steps that is going through. It's initializing, then it's going to clone our repository here. It's installing dependencies based on what we have in this package.json. And it's building, but it failed. And the reason it failed is because if I continue the project, I mistakenly, if we look into build, yes, if you look into this build configuration, Hono doesn't require, so if you look into scripts, we don't have a build script, so it doesn't require building. So I can just remove this and hit update. And the next time I publish something into this repository, it will work. So because we've made this change, I can publish, I can git add, git commit, change API Wrangler name. Let's say I'm doing this push into the main origin. So as you can see, without me doing anything else, this is already building. If I go in here into deployments, I see that it was enough to just do a change and I have this being built. So if I view the build, we see that it's skipped. Now it's skipped building the application because we don't have that command, and it's getting deployed. While this is deploying, I can just grab this URL. I can go back to workers and I can switch to pages and deploy the web part. So I'll select video Webflow structure, begin setup. Build command is going to be pm run build, and build output is going to be dist. For root, same thing as we did, because it's a monorepo, we need to specify the path, so it's going to be web. And environment variables, how did we name that? If we come here, we grab this Vite API URL and put this and save and deploy. All right, so we see that it's going through the same steps. It's building my application this time because I specified that. We see that it finished successfully. It's deploying to Cloudflare's global network, and it succeeded. So now, if I go back, let's check. We see that the API also deployed successfully. So if I check deployments, actually if I click on this button here, I see that I get a random number every time I refresh this. Perfect. So now if I go to workers and I'll check this client-side code and I click visit, you'll notice that it doesn't work immediately. It takes a few minutes for it to load, and once to resolve the DNS, and then we would use the /main.js, but we'll need to wait a bit. While we wait, let me show you what we would do with this link. So we grab this link that we have, we put main.js at the end, and we go back in Webflow and we will paste it here in this prod URL. So we save and we hit publish. Perfect. Now it got published. It won't work because we need to wait until this is resolved. And while we wait, let's do the other branches. So we have one branch for main, but we said that we need another branch for development. So to do another branch, you do git checkout -b and you specify the branch name, and in this case is develop. A branch called develop already exists. Wait. Yeah, if in my case I had that already created, but it's fine. Also in Cursor and VS Code you have a tab like this, so you can control GitHub visually. I just prefer it by the terminal. All right, so let's say we are doing another feature. Now, there is another path that you can follow, and that one is to not touch Webflow at all. So if you don't want to touch Webflow, you can use this index.html to test your components. So let's say I want to do another components for hello, okay? Or we did run, let's say we do random text, rand text. Okay, and let's say this random text will have a title, random text of the day, with a paragraph, and this will have the data text. What I like to do is to do a custom element and then use data dash and my data attributes. So if I had multiple ones, maybe this will be a title or a body or whatever I need. But in this case, I just need a data text. Okay, so now if we check the web, you navigate by pressing on the arrows, up and down arrows. If I go into web, you see that it still works. So if I go local, actually I have it. Yes, I have it open here already. Localhost 5173, or if you want to change that, you can come here and change this port here. Okay, so we have this, which means that we don't need to touch Webflow right now. We can work here, but if I inspect, I'll see that Vite, this doesn't run. And the reason it doesn't run is because Vite doesn't have Webflow. There is nothing Webflow here except for our function. So what we can do is we can, if you look on a Webflow website and you do window.webflow, you'll see that it has this underscore property. So we can use that. Now, if we go back into our Webflow, we can put an end here and do that, and see that it can have that object. So now in here, I'll do another, I'll move this below and say that if it doesn't have window.webflow dot and that underscore, then we'll just call main directly. Otherwise, we'll use this. So this way we can make sure that it runs even if it doesn't have that. Canary parts are undefined, reading. Yeah, we can do also if it doesn't have Webflow. Actually, is this a good? Yes, it runs only once, so it's okay. All right, so now we can run it in Vite as well without any Webflow, which means that we can do that component. So rand text.ts, we do another class, pxRandText, extends that, we define it, we define how this looks. So pxRandText must match this here. And on the connected callback, we can just do a random text. So to make it easy, I'll just do const. Actually, inside this constructor, we can do this dot random texts, let's say, and doesn't it exist? What's nice about cursor is that we can let it fix that issue for us. The reason is because we need to specify what inputs this has. but it's fine. We can, okay, it doesn't work for some reason, but we don't need. So what we can do, so we can specify that it has a private method called random text, which is a string array, and we'll also initialize it with some random text. And so let's put hello world. Right, will it a list? Generate 7 other texts. And while that is generating, okay, perfect. And now we can just use it. So we can do actually, let's see. Let me modify random text to include more random text. I'll edit the file to add 7 additional random text options. Okay, that's nice. Use those. Use one. One. I should have said there. But we can do, yeah, we can do a random index actually. All right, so if we refresh this, could not establish connection. That's odd. Yeah, okay, so we have this random text, we just need to use it. Const rand text element, we check if it has at least one, and yeah. But instead of inner HTML, we want to actually do we actually want to do another one, text element. Yeah, this is that text element. It's going to be that because we wanted this from within. So we define the variable on this class, and then we initialize it here with the data text, and then just use it in the connected callback. So now if we refresh, we'll get a different text every time we refresh. Perfect. So we have this feature, and let's say we'll do our branch. Well, let's say we want to put this on a different branch. We'll say rand text, git add, git commit, random text, git push. We push it first to feature random text, and then we can go into GitHub. We see that we have a message here that it has recent pushes anyway. So we can do compare and pull request, and we can compare it to don't worry, you can still create a pull request. Yes, because let's do a branch. If you go inside branches, we can do a new branch called develop from main, and we'll do compare pull requests, and we'll compare to develop. Okay, and we see that it has some merge conflicts. Now let's see what this is about. So if you click on resolve, this is actually useful because if you make a change that can break something or conflicts with somebody else's change, this will let you know, so it's harder to break the code in this setup. In this setup, what happened is that hello element. Let's see what happened in this setup. We can. So we need okay. So we import this middleware. Okay. This we put at the end, so we can delete it. Okay, I'll just copy this. This should be what we have right now. And for global.ts, let's see. Yeah, we just need it how we have it now. So I'll just commit the merge, and usually you have to wait for this to publish. It's doing a build and it will let you know if something fails. But I'll just merge it for now. Actually, no, it failed the build. Let's see why. Yeah, why do we have... This is so weird, okay. Cannot find modules, utils that middleware is corresponding, cannot find modules, components that hello. We haven't used this, so I'll delete it. Okay, yeah. And we'll delete this as well. No, actually no, we have this. Meta Vite API, PS hello, okay. Components that hello, cannot find module components that hello. Yeah, when you do git pull for the first time, you need to select how you want to pull. Git pull basically takes the code. If something was done on the server, or if somebody else did a change, you can do git pull and it will replace your code with that change. Okay, so if we run pm run build inside this folder, yeah, we see that it expects these components that hello, which no longer exists because we said that this is a random number. All right, so if we do pm run build, okay, so this is how it's supposed to look. px random number and components has random number.ts, which will get the random number and it will set it to that. I think what happened was that I was doing this previously, so it conflicted with some changes I did. But yeah, so the build worked. So now if the build were locally, there is a high chance that it's gonna work perfectly on the server as well. So I'll do git add, git commit, fit, random text, git push. We'll push it on this branch as well. And we can go back to GitHub and we'll do another merge I'll create a pull request. And let's see if this time the build works. Yeah, seems like it's deploying fine. All right. So that, yeah, deployed successfully. So this means that we can safely merge this pull request into our development branch. And we can do a compare and pull request from develop to main. And we can see everything that was changed. So we can do create pull request and merge the pull. Because it worked previously, we didn't change much. We can just merge it. So let's see, in the meantime, let's see if this now works. It works perfectly. So now it means that if I go to my cursors and I do Command C to cut the server and I refresh, it still works. It throws this error because we no longer have the server running, but the code works fine, which is amazing. So now we also did that change and we pushed a new feature into it, which built successfully. So now if I do another custom element and we follow this structure here, px rand text, and inside it we do it a heading to random text of the day, and we do another paragraph, and we give this the attribute called data text. Yeah, let's also put it there. No, let's give it a wrapper. Tree run. So now if I publish this to the live website, you can refresh and I can see that I have this random text as well. And what's good is that you can follow this to basically, you can build whatever components or functions or scripts you need inside this, and once you are done to actually move it to Webflow, you just redo the structure in Webflow and that's it. You'll have it working in Webflow. Now, one other thing I can show you here, another use for these environment variables is, which is really, really nice. Let's say you have some sort of global variable. Okay. You can, what you can do, let's say you have an element here. I'll put just a paragraph. I'll say data global var. So I'll hit publish, and while that is done, global var element document data global var. If you have that, and we replace it with what comes from this variable, from our env. Actually I need to restart my server. pm run dev. Yeah, so now, okay, now this comes from our environment variable. Okay, so if I were to push this, and actually I'll need to, yeah, it's fine. We'll add it here as well. Git commit fit global var. And we go to Cloudflare. We go into settings. You can also see here that for every deployment, it creates a preview, but it's not that useful in Webflow. I'll go to settings. And what I can do now is I can define that here. So I'll click add, I'll get this, and I'll put this. Okay, and I'll save. And I'll move this to, I'll do a pull request into develop from that random text feature. Yeah, we see that this changed and it ended up in main. So I'll just create this and I'll merge it quickly. We don't need to wait for the build. It's just a simple change. So we do from develop to main. We see that it's going to push this change. And we're going to merge the pull request. So now, if you look at, now, yeah, these two, so it's building the APIs, building the pages. Every time you do a push into main, it's going to build everything. Okay, but we're interested in this pages build. And I will cut my server. Okay, it's almost done. All right, perfect. So now if we go into the front end and I refresh, yeah, I see that we're in production. We see this. So now comes the interesting part. I don't even have to change anything in my code. If I go to Cloudflare and I change this variable again into hello world 123 and click save and go into deployments, I can trigger a redeployment. Okay. Perfect. The upload is completed. So now if I go into here, I'll see that it got changed to 123. So it can be useful if you have some forms or you need to, yeah, there are a lot of things where this would be useful. But yeah, this is how we can achieve a proper code structure, and it can scale very fast, and you can build a lot of complexity, and the code that runs very quickly because it's served by Cloudflare, which has an extremely powerful CDN. All right, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.